that was the sweet, sweet sounds of Lenny Horne and the Ovaries with their rendition of It's My Pineapple Now, Julia. Originally written, of course, by Toby Grunt with his mostly fruit and hatbox-based quintet, the Moonshine Pickle Party, in 1972. Most of the Ovaries have now sadly passed away due to an altercation with a bus in Tampa in 1988, but Lenny Horne can be seen these days on commercials for hair-reviving tonics on the Who the Fuck Cares network, Ohio. And now, a little later than usual, but no less blubbery or moist, it's the show the Harvard Lampoon once accidentally tripped over while trying to find the restrooms at Wesley Snipes' house, which led to a costly lawsuit and several exchanges of damp clothing. Yes, you guessed it, it's the After-Movie Diner, which this week comes from a charming little dinette in Nonchalance, Missouri, called Get It and Go. Your waitress will be Montana, and the special tonight is fried whale teeth in a hollandaise sauce-drenched napkin.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner with your host, John Cross. Brought to you by
Smooth Loos. They're the hottest sauces around. You need it to get all hot and sticky up in here? Then you want to go to smoothloos.com. That's SMOOTHLOUS.com. Pick up your hot sauces today. They're tasty. They're yummy. I poured it in my bath and sat in it.
And now, here's your host, John Cross.
Hello and welcome to the After Movie Diner, and this episode is an incredibly special episode. It's our first all singing, all dancing Bigfoot episode. We're going to be talking Squatch tonight, which I'm very excited about. And to join me on this show, he is a writer, a director, a producer. There is pretty much nothing this gentleman does not do when it comes to film. His latest movie, Hunting Grounds, formerly Valley of the Sasquatch, is coming out on May 2nd, which should be right when you're listening to this. But previously has been involved with writing such great indie horror faves as The Invoking and The Device, which I reviewed on video for the website a while ago. It is the one, the only, and the exceptionally awesome John Portanova. A pleasure to have you on the show, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've been a long-time listener through your show, and then also I think I first heard about you through Bloodbaths and Boomsticks. So it's really exciting to be talking Squatch for a little while.
Yeah, indeed. You come to me via Tim Gross and Kyle Poling over at the Bloodbaths and Boomstick podcast. I think that's where we first connected, and there's a wonderful cast of characters that show up on that show. So I feel like my friend group and my connections just expands exponentially because of those wonderful two fellows. How did you first come to know Tim and Kyle?
Well, when we first made my production company, the October People, when we did our first movie, which at the time was called Cedar Ridge, it's since got worldwide distribution under the retitle The Invoking. I was kind of in charge of reaching out to reviewers. And so I was doing a lot of research, digging around like, okay, who reviews indie movies that don't have representation, that aren't on DVD? Like I'm just sending them a burned DVD that I made and then, checked on my TV on my nights off. And I believe I probably just found Tim was what it was, and his website with gross movie reviews. And so then I reached out and was like, hey, do you want to see a movie? And of course, because that's what he does, he watches every movie that's ever existed, whether or not it will ever have representation. He said, fine, yeah. And then him and Kyle talked about it on the show. And then I think a couple months later, I was like, hey, I love that episode. I listened to all the other episodes. Like, I'd love to be a guest sometime. And so then I was a guest on their show. I think this was back in 2013 or something like that. And after that is when all the other movies kind of started coming about, and they were nice enough to have me back on, even when there wasn't a movie to talk about of mine, just to talk about movies I love, because I probably enjoy talking about other people's movies more than I even enjoy making mine.
Right. No, and I think that's definitely, along with, it was you and sort of T-Shirt Joe and Ed Quillen and people like that, like those names seemed mythical to me when I was just a listener of the show. Obviously, I mean, I'd guested on the show, but I hadn't met those guys yet. since then, I've actually met him twice now. I've been out to Pittsburgh for the Horror Realm, which is just a blast if you're ever over in the east side of the country. Horror Realm is just fantastic, and those guys are the best guys to hang out with. It really is. It feels to me like Pittsburgh definitely, like when I show up once every other year, feels like a second home to me now. You know, those guys are great. They're really friendly and familiar now.
Yeah, I need to meet Tim in person. Haven't had that opportunity yet, but I did get to hang out with Kyle a couple years ago at Horror Hound in Indianapolis. We had, when it was known as Valley of the Sasquatch, we have all these, movies getting retitled.
Yeah, of course.
We played at Horror Hound, and so I hung out with him. I think it was like that Sunday. That was a lot of fun. Really nice guy. And he, of course, got dissed by Yaphet Kotto. So now he went from one of his favorite actors to one of his least favorite actors. So I got to witness that. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, Yaphet's gone a little odd, let's just say, in his older years. He's not quite.
Well, he keeps getting abducted by aliens.
Right. That apparently so, according to his Facebook page. So who knows? But yeah, I mean, that happens. Sometimes we meet people that we have loved our entire lives, and they're not who we thought they were. Listen, Fred Williamson endorsed Trump, so I had to do some serious soul searching about my love for the Hammer. And it doesn't. I mean, look, it doesn't take away from his excellent body of work, not in the slightest, but. It's always a little difficult. I don't know if you heard our episode just at the end of February with the three black geeks, but they were talking about Fred the Hammer and Jim Brown, who both kind of somehow fell under the spell of Trump. So, well, I mean, it is what it is. So anyway, yes, you have this new film coming out, Hunting Grounds. I reviewed this, I want to say, like at least 2 years ago now, under the title The Valley of the Sasquatch. But I rewatched it last night, and it's as good, if not better, as I remember it being. I really do love your films, because I think that you have brought to genre films kind of the things that I love about the best genre films, and that is just because they're genre films doesn't mean that they can't have heart, intelligence, great characters, and like central themes on and above the monster or the haunting or the sci-fi cliche or whatever it is that people are using. You remember to whip in some characters and some drama in there, and your writing always reflects that. I feel that that's a conscious effort on your part, just from the films I've seen of yours. But is that definitely like what you set out to do?
Yeah, back when we were making Cedar Ridge, at that time I was writing with Jeremy Berg, who's a producing partner of mine, and he directed that film. We also then went on to write The Device, and then Hunting Grounds is one that I just wrote by myself. But when we first started working together, when we first started the October People, we were consciously thinking like, okay, we're making a micro-budget movie. Now Cedar Ridge, which got put out as The Invoking, so it's always weird, like what do you refer to it as? Because right. I like the old title, but everyone knows it as the new title. Yeah. That one was made, we shot it in 7 days, and the budget was about $15,000 that we charged to credit cards. It was very much like, we have nothing. We're not getting anywhere making shorts and web series as we were trying to do them before that. So let's make a feature. That seems to be the currency people work in. If it doesn't work out, then we kind of know that maybe this thing isn't for us. But, luckily it did end up getting out there. But because it was such a tiny thing, that's like all we could afford to do. We took a week off of work, and we got a tiny cast together, and it was 7 days, 18-hour days sometimes to get that movie in the can. And so we were like, all right, what do we have? We don't have a bunch of money for a big monster. We don't have a bunch of money for crazy effects, even though we like that stuff in movies. Creature features are probably my favorite subgenre. But we were like, okay, we do have actors and characters. Let's get good actors, the best actors we can find that kind of no one knows about yet, local to Seattle around here. And let's give them interesting characters to chew on and arcs and storylines, and that will be what kind of drives the drama of the movie. And then when the horror, the psychological aspect starts coming out of that, it's that much stronger. Because I'm one of those people where there can be horror fans who they relate to Jason. That's what they love about the Friday the 13th movies.
Yeah.
What I love when I watch those movies is Tommy Jarvis or some of the better developed teenagers from like the final chapter, which is my favorite of that series.
Right.
And
Crispin Glover's dancing, of course.
Exactly. And it's just really, you got these funny characters and they're entertaining. I also love things like American Werewolf in London, just so you can get the character development in a way that it's not slowing things down to a crawl. It's really funny. Those guys are really entertaining, but it's also really tragic. I mean, there's a scene where one of them's trying to slit his wrist in a phone booth, and it's in the same movie where you get, all these jokes about sheep shitting on their packs.
Yeah.
And so that was just something that we wanted to do in our films where it's like, okay, let's make it so the audience cares about the reality of these characters. So then when things go into unreality and supernatural realms, they're kind of along for the ride because you've established, okay, these are people they're dealing with things that you understand from this reality. They're not just, these drunk assholes that are doing whatever stupid thing they need to do to get them alone in a barn with Jason.
Yeah, of course. And the Invoking or Cedar Ridge must have done something because they went ahead and did a straight-to-video sequel to that, right? And you had nothing to do with that. They just named a straight-to-video sequel The Invoking 2. So I mean, someone out there must be renting and watching The Invoking in order for there to be in order for the title, I suppose, to have cachet for The Invoking 2, am I right? Or
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. They actually made 2 sequels. It's like a trilogy now,
really?
Which is so weird. But yeah, that was just, it did well enough for the distributor that they decided, hey, we're going to make another one. And they reached out to us and said, do you guys want to crank something out? Because we need something on the shelf in I think they said 6 months. And this was after we had made the device, which also came about because of how well The Invoking was doing. The same distributor asked us, hey, do you guys want to do something else? We'll let you do whatever you want. Just put a monster in it so we can put that on the cover. So we thought, oh, we like aliens. We'll do an alien movie.
Yeah.
And then they didn't put it on the cover, but that's just distributors for you.
We want a monster that we can put on the cover. We're not going to put it on the cover, but that's what we wanted originally. Yeah. It seems it changes every 5 minutes in this game, right?
Exactly. So with the device, we were really under the gun. That was a movie that went from screenplay to picture locked and sent off to the distributor within 8 months. Wow. Which is insane.
Yeah.
And we knew that we didn't want to do that again. And they wanted us to do an Invoking 2 within less time. So we're like, that's just not for us. So what they did is they made an anthology. Both part 2 and 3 are anthologies, but they're made up of pre-existing short films. So it's really weird. It's really just sort of this obvious, well, we've got these short films laying around. Let's put them together, kind of cash grabby kind of thing. But you know what? I know a lot of the filmmakers that had shorts included in those anthologies, and they were really excited because suddenly their short film is in Redbox because it's part of this anthology. Yeah. So although we don't love the fact that there's this really strange series, I mean, I guess that's the one thing to kind of be proud of. It's there's the house movies, there's the prom night movies, and then there's the Invoking as far as weird series that don't really fit together at all.
Right. Exactly. But that's always good, and it's interesting because I guess The Invoking and the way that the video cover looks, it's trying to certainly with distribution, it's trying to play on the back of stuff like the Connecticut haunting movies and a lot of these haunted house things that have come out and the Amityville remake and all that sort of stuff. But I'm not a fan of those films, but I do really like your film, The Invoking, because again, I sort of think it harkens back to those great horror movies of the late 70s, early 80s, not necessarily because of the subject matter or because you're trying to do something retro, but because it's a melodrama with a supernatural element rather than supernatural elements and, oh, by the way, there's a will they, won't they romance in it,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that actually is interesting. The reason why I think you might like it where you don't like those other movies is because it's not really like those other kind of haunted house sort of movies. That was something where in advertising, with the original title we had of Cedar Ridge, the original poster we made when it was playing at film festivals, it was just this moody, weird kind of hillside with strange figures at the top of the hill. And we movie. So we were like, yeah, it's this sort of mystery, and the backstory of the characters will get revealed, and the psychological underpinnings. And of course, when a distributor gets it, they don't care about that. They don't care about what the movie really is. What they care about is what will sell. And so they put a cover on there with a big Gothic mansion on the front with a ghost in the corner window, and then that's what they sell to people. And so it does make sense that as someone who isn't really into those films, you would still react well to the film. But then on the flip side, when a movie that's marketed like that goes wide, and The Invoking was in Walmart, it was in Redbox, everyone's renting it because they think it's like those movies that they like.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they get pissed.
Yeah, I've never quite understood that, because, I mean, I suppose it's in this day and age of where reviews. I heard someone recently, and I don't know who exactly it was, but it was someone on a podcast that was saying, and it was a professional filmmaker, was saying that sort of reviews. I tell you who it was. It was John Cusack in one of his many weird, random Comic-Con Q&As. He hasn't done that many, but he's done like a couple in Chicago, and I think he showed up to one in Pennsylvania, I think, and a couple of others. He doesn't do them too often, but I was watching one of his Q&As, and he said basically that because everyone is a reviewer now, whether it's IMDb or whether it's Rotten Tomatoes or whether it's podcasts or whether it's blogs, that distributors or studios are not that interested in reviews. Like, it's not that a film has to go out there necessarily and work on its word of mouth. I think the best ones still do. The best films still work on word of mouth. But he was saying, in case of just getting a movie out there and having it in Walmart and Redbox and everywhere else, it's a case of what can the distributor do to put it in front of someone's face, you know what I mean? And there's always been that aspect to it. We go back to whether it's the Grindhouse movies having salacious titles and crazy posters and then not delivering on any of those things, or whether it's Troma making Nymphoid Barbarian and Dinosaur Hell. And I can tell you, I've sat through that movie. There's nothing nymphonic about her. She's hardly a barbarian, and I think there's only 2 dinosaurs, and they certainly aren't hellish. So that's like a. But those kind of movies have always that kind of aspect of it has always been out there. But yeah, I do wonder what the person who loves, The Haunting and Annabelle's Connecticut, whatever, The Exorcist of Emily Rose kind of movies, sits down to watch The Invoking. I wonder. I mean, I hope they still have a great time with it. I hope they sit down and go, okay, it's not what I expected, but. However, that's not normally the thing. People who like door slamming movies and pale-faced boy ghosts with long black matted hair, they're not getting that from that film.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting what you're talking about with the old exploitation kind of things. It's like this love-hate thing I have, because I think back on it and I'm like, man, like Roger Corman, like we idolize these movies where it's like, Screamers. They say, you'll see a man turn inside out. No, he doesn't.
Right.
And, there's stuff on the posters that never shows up in the movie. His trailers were full of car explosions that never showed up. They were just taken from Death Race or whatever. He just kept reusing the same stock footage in his trailers. And it's like, that's just a flat out lying, as much as, the distributors are by putting a haunted house on the front of The Invoking. But like, we love those movies. And I think it's because it's like something in the past. So now when you go and look those up on IMDb, maybe it's not like, people aren't talking about them like Casablanca, but they might have like a 5 or something on IMDb as far as the average rating.
Yeah.
But when a new movie comes out that does the same thing, they hate it. The Invoking right now on IMDb has a 2.8, and that's out of 10. Like, it might as well be one of the worst movies ever made. And I think a lot of it, I'm not going to say everyone's going to love the movie because it's a specific sort of thing, but like, I think the marketing really, people had a box in their hand, and when it wasn't that and it was full of actors they didn't recognize and they felt lied to, they were like, well, I guess it's garbage.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult, I mean, I find these this rating thing and the thumbs down thing a kind of odd slippery slope. There's some stuff that I've put up on YouTube and Reddit and various other places that where it can be, given a rating or given a thumbs up, thumbs down, and you kind of look at it and you go, really? Okay, 12 people have given that a thumbs down, but you're like, this is just an article about an Evil Dead episode or something, or Ash vs. Evil Dead episode. And you're like, really? You've given it like 10 thumbs down, and you have to kind of go, well, like, if you clicked on the article and you didn't like the article, I guess it's okay for you to give it a thumbs down. But if you clicked on the article thinking it was going to be something else, but it's an Ash vs. Evil Dead, or if you don't like me, or if you don't like the website, and like, why did you bother to give it a thumbs down? Like, I'll give something a thumbs up if I love it, but if I don't love it, I just walk away. Like, it's the people whose mindset is, no, I have to give it a thumbs down, or I have to give it a shitty rating. I'm like, if I watch a movie and I think it's shitty, I don't go on to IMDb and go, I must write a shitty. I don't understand the mindset of people. Like, if I watch a movie and I love it, I go, especially an indie movie like yours, I'll go out of my way to do a review, or I'll go out of my way and do an IMDb rating or whatever. But I won't, like, do a negative one, because even the worst movie on the planet took 2 years of someone's life to make, or at least a year of someone's life to make. And, you know, people are just, I don't get it, but it is what it is.
Michael, we're broke. Will's letting us stay here in exchange for fixing the place up.
Where's the cabin?
A few hundred yards that away.
We're both gonna have to make do with what's been given to us.
Looks like somebody ransacked the place.
I've heard stories. Stories of strange things being seen in the woods. Happened about 90 years ago. There was a group of miners working on this mountain. One night, they were attacked in their cabin.
We gotta stay alert tonight. What if they come back for us?
Sounds like they're pushing on the walls.
We gotta get out of here, man. That thing is still out there.
Help me. It pulled me into the woods.
We won't stop till it kills us all.
From the Invoking, you found the actor, or I don't know if you found him from this, but he shows up again in Hunting Grounds, and he's by far like my favorite of the cast you regularly use, and that's D'Angelo Midili, who is just, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, D'Angelo, is it? D'Angelo Midili?
Yeah, it's D'Angelo.
But he is incredible. Like, I think he needs to be in so many more things and have a much bigger name. I thought him and then the two guys who showed up in John Dies at the End were like three of my favorite young actor discoveries of 2015 or whenever it was, when I first kind of came across them. How did you meet D'Angelo?
It's funny, actually. D'Angelo has been in everything that I personally have directed, and almost everything that I've been involved in as a writer or a producer. So back, before we were making The Invoking as a feature, I moved to Seattle maybe in like 2006, grew up in Washington, but, went to the city to make movies, get involved in the film scene. And the first movie I was a PA on, D'Angelo was the lead actor. And it was this really crazy shoot on weekends, gangster kind of Tarantino riff. And it wasn't the best experience as far as like positivity, but it was a great experience as far as learning, because I learned, I don't want to run sets like this. I want, and like finding some cool people, like, this makeup artist who later D'Angelo married, she's really good. I should use her when I start making my own stuff. D'Angelo's awesome. I should use him as an actor when I start making my own stuff. And so then that relationship developed into short films. I did a web series for about a year, and he showed up as a recurring character. And it was just whenever there was an episode I was directing, I was like, I love his character. I love him. I'm going to put him in it. If I'm doing a short film, he's the lead. And so when it came time to make The Invoking, myself and Jeremy, who I mentioned earlier, who was the director, we were like, well, we've worked with D'Angelo so much. We're making this movie where we need to find great actors who are unknown enough to be able to, make very little money and shoot it all in just a week, like, running as fast as they can the whole time.
Yeah.
and he was down for it, and he delivered an awesome performance, a very interesting performance. There's been some cool reactions to his character in that movie. From my sense, he got kind of freaked out by it, but a lot of girls started reaching out to him who found it in Redbox or in Walmart, and they were like, oh, like, I love you, like, you're amazing. And his character, I mean, I guess at this point probably people have seen it, I won't totally spoil it, but he has a very twisted sense of loyalty to the lead girl in the movie that Trin Miller played. And that his love for her and admiration and the way what he was trying to do for her, no matter how like twisted and evil eventually it became, like, the female audience reacted to that, and they're like, we don't care if you're freaky in this movie, we want to get freaky with you. And so he was getting like these love letters and things, in his email, and he's like, I haven't experienced anything like this. And so then when it came time for Hunting Grounds, it was the first thing I was directing, and it just, it made sense. Like, it would be weird for me to be directing something where he wasn't on set, and he was the best guy for that part. It was actually a hard part to cast, of the kind of nice guy uncle, and it was something different for him. He said he actually had a hard time getting into this character who is so positive, in a not like weird kind of for their own gain sort of secretly evil way, but just really the supportive uncle in this life of a kid who doesn't really have any positive role models.
Right.
And he was like, oh, it's hard for me to kind of find that, but I think once he did, he's like the heart at the middle of the movie. I think the relationship between him and the kid was played by an actor named Miles Joris-Peyrafitte. I think their interaction is some of the best parts of the movie. And I mean, this is a movie where like Bigfoot is like ripping people's arms off, and people will say like, oh, my favorite scene of the movie was when it was those two characters sitting and talking for 5 minutes. And I think that's really cool. It shows how good they are as actors.
No, definitely, and that's I was going to say I'm glad he's noticed that, and you noticed did that on purpose. But his part, he's got a look that he could definitely play villains his whole career, and that's not to say like he's ugly or disfigured or anything. He's a handsome gentleman, but he's got like those eyebrows and those eyes, and there's just something about him that he could quite easily be menacing, and you also have in Hunting Grounds a genre favorite, Bill Oberst Jr., who also I think gets cast quite frequently in sort of villainous roles, or kind of slightly insidious or malevolent kind of characters. And yet both him and D'Angelo in Hunting Grounds, not to really spoil anything, but both of them are playing almost against type and playing very positive, caring, or at least sympathetic roles. And yet what I like so much about Hunting Grounds is that the world around them doesn't really give a shit about that. The world around them is like, oh, it's lovely that you're a nice person, but what I mean?
No, the thing you mentioned with Bill is so true. It's really interesting. Like, this is a guy who works all the time. He's in hundreds of indie films. Usually he's the villain because he's so good at it. He can get so intense, which that's something that D'Angelo has as well. When he locks eyes with someone, like, it is intense. He's giving them his full attention, and he is going to control this conversation that they're having. And that can be a very off-putting thing, or kind of creepy thing. But then also, if you just can spin it a little bit and be like, oh, they're really listening, they're really supporting this person, then they can be kind of like the nice guy. And so that was something that Bill sort of reacted really well to, was he was like, I'm always this murderer, rapist, monster kind of guy. It's cool that I just sort of show up, have an altercation with Bigfoot, and, fight on the side of the good guys. And so I thought he did a really good job. He has one of the hardest parts in the movie, and that's why I wanted an actor who's just like been on as many sets as he has. And because he's been on more sets than I ever will be. Like, from the behind the camera standpoint, when you're a director or a producer, eventually you realize like these actors will be on like 10 times, 20 times as many sets as I'll ever be on, just because they're doing multiple projects a year. And so using that experience really well, because we had a good schedule for Hunting Grounds. It was our biggest production yet. It was about 23 days. But that character of Bauman, who Bill plays, he was only in the schedule for 4 days. And it was 4 days where we had a lot of Sasquatch interaction. So, kind of suit effects, but then also a lot of production challenges, and that some of it takes place in like this dark cave, which sort of like didn't really exist. We get into the commentary and the documentary that's on the DVD. It's this whole weird thing, but it was just a very stressful kind of shooting section. And so we're like, we need to just hire a guy who's on top of it and we know can deliver a great performance. And we had, Bill had kind of run in the same circles as us. Some of our sales reps for previous movies had worked with him and were recommending him for our upcoming projects. And so we're like, yeah, this makes sense. Even though it's against type, we know he can do it. And you would believe him working off of a dude in a monkey suit with, just dark blackness in the background.
Right. And it's funny because, I've not met the gentleman, but I've interviewed him. And obviously I know him from online and his reputation in general. And like most horror people, Bill is incredibly sweet, incredibly soft-spoken. There's nothing like violent or ugly about him at all. In fact, Bill, in regards to him directly, he's very religious, right? He's very spiritual and faith-based and so on. So he plays, like you say, these he's probably... The reason why he's so lovely is he's probably exercising all the demons that the rest of us have to carry around with us. Probably it's very cathartic for him, but he's a real sweetie, right, in person?
Oh, totally. And I was something that just helped so much. Not only was he such a pro, and it didn't matter that we had to rush through these days. We're getting like something like 40 setups a day, which we were kind of used to it back from when we made the Invoking in a week. But on the set of Sasquatch, it was just this totally different sort of thing. For the crew, suddenly we're like, oh yeah, this is kind of what we're used to, and now we sort of all get to experience it together for a couple days with Bill. But he was just so on it. He always knew, like, as we were blocking out the scene based on where the camera was going to be and what kind of it was, he would know pretty approximately where his mark was going to be, even before I was like, hey, Bill, here's this exact mark. Because he was just like, well, if the camera's right there and it's that kind of lens, I just need to be here. And I was like, yep.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like that experience really helps move things along. And so it was so great. And yeah, he's just so nice. It didn't matter that it was long hours. It didn't matter that he was laying around in the dirt or getting drug around or whatever. He was always up for it.
Yeah, and it's an enviable... it's an enviable career. It's one of the things that the more sort of indie filmmakers I come across or network with or become friends with or whatever it is, the more kind of even if it's a tiny little cameo or something like that, like the more weird stuff I can show up in, the happier I am. Not that I do it very often, but I went to film school. I went to study film at college, but it was basically like a film school. Because I always wanted to make stuff, and I ended up just doing the podcast and music for film and various other stuff just because of I have always ended up living in places where not that I don't have friends, but they're always friends that are off doing 101 different things. I've never had that since college, actually, that group of friends that can kind of, and going out to make a film, you have to have at least 12 to 20 people to start with, before you even... so I've just never been in that setup, so I ended up talking about them rather than making them. But the odd set that I've been on and the odd things that I've done, I've always loved it. So I envy people like Bill Oberst Jr. or Ted Raimi, who I got to meet recently, or any of those guys who are just out there and is like, I'll show up for one day on a little indie thing, but I'll also go and I'll play a cameo in a big Hollywood thing, And that kind of career to me just seems romantic and exotic to me. I don't know that anyone has a desire to. Lots of people have it, but I don't know that I have any desire to go out and be Samuel L. Jackson. You know what I mean? But like to do like little cameos in weird little indie films and have some sort of mad IMDb list by the time I get too old to do it. That would be a thrill. So I'm always jealous of people like Bill, but he is fantastic and a lovely guy. And when I spoke to him, he certainly seemed like a very genuine cat. So, and he's great in the movie. And it was interesting actually because yesterday I sat down and watched the three movies that we're sort of talking about on this episode, and that was Sasquatch-the-Legend-of-Bigfo from 1976. Abominable, which is from 2006, so exactly 30 years later, and then your film, again, I rewatched it only this time now as Hunting Grounds, And it's funny because there are certain things that I noticed, certainly from Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, that you had put nods to that I wouldn't have recognized before that. So just to preface that for the listeners, I asked John to pick some Bigfoot films that either are his favorite or influenced him or whatever, and he picked 4, and out of those 4 I decided that it would be good to take one from the 70s, from the classic era of those sort of early Bigfoot films, all the way through to the more recent straight to video wham bam style ones, and actually I think we picked a good couple, but so tell me, man, when did you first get into monster movies in general? But I mean, is Bigfoot, Sasquatch a particular favorite of yours? Are you one of these guys who kind of watches any Bigfoot movie that's out there?
Yeah, I definitely will watch any Bigfoot movie that's out there. But one thing that's so interesting about it is it's one of those subgenres where it's like there's not very many good ones. And so I think like that's might even kind of be like my lot, because the other monster that I love are werewolves, and it's like I can count on one hand the good werewolf movies, right. and then there's all the atrocious ones, and there's a lot of atrocious Bigfoot movies. But it's just one of those things with Bigfoot in particular where I grew up fascinated by this idea of real monsters. I mean, that's The Device is an alien abduction movie that feeds into that whole same thing of like reality paranormal. Real ghost stories always freaked me out when I was a kid. The idea whenever I'm in the woods, I'm on the lookout like, oh, is Bigfoot around? And right. It's half like, oh, it's exciting, and half like the most terrifying thing. And so when I was growing up, I'd be reading books about all of these creatures. They're in like the 001 or whatever section of the library just at the very beginning. They're like, this is kind of we'll start here and then we'll get into the real stuff afterwards, I think is how they laid that out with the Dewey Decimal System. Right. And so I would just pore over books like that. And then my favorite show growing up was Unsolved Mysteries, which I'm so excited is now like on Amazon Prime. You can stream, I think it's the first 4 seasons, like as actual entire seasons. Before this, they only ever released like some best ofs on DVD, and I have them and they're amazing. But it's just such a cool show. It freaked me out so much. Just the music, Robert Stack, even if they weren't talking about Bigfoot, if they were talking about like a lost love, like, oh, I want to find my sister, like I would still get horrified.
Right. Anything with Robert Stack, really. He's a very intense person.
Yeah. And so that was just something where I was fascinated and horrified growing up. And so that led me to when I started getting into filmmaking, which was in like early high school. I started like writing down ideas in a notebook, and it would just, I still have the notebook, and most of it's just like one page. At the top of the page, I'd write like this general log line, and then maybe I'd fill it in and have some plot outlines or whatever. But one of those ones that I wrote down, which was based on kind of a lifetime of knowledge of these true Bigfoot encounters, was I thought like, oh, it'd be cool. What could be a low budget movie is Night of the Living Dead with Bigfoot. And where I got the idea for that from is a true story that's actually reenacted in Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. And that's the 1924 Mount St. Helens attack that happened with a bunch of miners. And it's a scene. It's one of the best scenes in Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. And in Hunting Grounds, I have the character that D'Angelo plays. He kind of tells an exaggerated version of that story around the campfire. And so it's really one of those stories that always stuck in my mind, because even though I refer to Bigfoot as like a monster, it's really more just like a creature. To me, it's like this unknown animal. And so it always is interesting when you get those rare stories where someone is killed or where someone is attacked, because that's not the norm. They aren't just these marauding monsters going around killing everyone. And that can be fun. We'll get to that kind of a story in Abominable. But that was something where usually in these movies, that's just their go-to. And usually I have a hard time buying it, because it's like, well, if this area is known as Squatch Land and everyone knows that he's just murdering people, it's like, we'll send the army in there and we'll have a dead Sasquatch in about 5 minutes because everyone knows he's walking around killing all these people. Right. And so I was really fascinated by this Mount St. Helens story and the fact that, and actually the opening part of it isn't reenacted in Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, which is kind of interesting. But the lead miner, Fred Beck, who recounted this story, until his death, he had mentioned that when he was first, they were kind of prospecting on Mount St. Helens, and he had seen something, in the bushes or in the trees, and he took a shot at it, and it was the Sasquatch. And so it wasn't just that, oh, they were miners in this area and then all of a sudden a bunch of Sasquatch started raining rocks down from the hills onto their cabin. It was one of them was injured, and so then they were going to kind of get revenge. And that sort of fed into this mythology that's sort of in the background in Hunting Grounds. I don't really go into it. I don't really have a scientist character or like, you know, the Native American guide who can tell you the whole mythology of Sasquatch, because I figure people know what's up at this point.
You mean the white guy wearing a wig and a bandana to make himself look Native American?
Yes, as he appears in Sasquatch, for sure. But so in the background, I wanted there to be like a reason why the attacks are happening when they attack or when they happen. So the fact that in this story from Mount St. Helens, the Sasquatch had been shot and then they wanted to get revenge. I was like, oh, that makes sense to me. They're not just going to run around and kill people when they're in their woods. That doesn't make sense. They're trying to hide from us. But if you attack them, they're going to want to get revenge. And so that's something I kind of tried to work into the mythology. There's another true story about a guy who was kidnapped by Bigfoot, and he was held captive by a family of Bigfoot for about 7 days. And that plays into part of the plot that Bill Oberst is a character in Hunting Grounds. And so it was really just like, okay, I want to cherry pick from sort of my favorite real life Bigfoot stories, put fictional characters into them and kind of mix them together in a blender and make a backstory. So in this movie, it makes sense why these creatures on this mountain at this time are doing the things they're doing to people. And so I think there's a lot of stuff with the fact that the mountain's being logged and the character of Sergio's backstory. You kind of, if you look at it, you can put it all together. But it's definitely something I didn't want to just like put front and center.
No, I think it definitely comes across. I mean, it's like any good monster movie, or certainly if we're talking King Kong, Sasquatch, a good vampire film, a good werewolf film, any of those. There has to be, even like a Frankenstein tale, there has to be empathy with the monster to some extent. I mean, one of the genius of, obviously you mentioned Night of the Living Dead there, but one of the genius of the sort of Romero thing with zombies is that it's a reflection of us, and therefore we have a kind of weird empathy for the zombies or a kind of weird love for the zombies in the same way that I kind of look, certainly in Hunting Grounds, and in your Sasquatch movie, that they're almost, I mean, yes, they're obviously animal-like and they're ape-like, but they're also almost like caveman-like in their the way that there is obviously a clan of them, a group of them, that they're living together, that they're more humanoid than bear, and you know, they're sort of primitive in their actions or reactions, and therefore, like you say, it's only man's sort of inhumanity to animal that causes them to lash back out. And I'm certainly, especially when it comes to Sergio and the father character, I'm certainly on the side of Sasquatch.
That was definitely something that mentioning Romero again, just the idea that the evil outside, it might not necessarily be the thing you have to worry about. And that was something that I thought was really fascinating. And this true story, which getting back to, Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, this true story that's reenacted in this movie, I thought gave just such a cool basis where you could tell a story like that. But instead of zombies trying to break in, it's Bigfoot, and allowed me to kind of like tell a siege movie.
July 1960. While flying over a remote section of northern Canada, a Canadian aircraft patrol pilot suddenly encountered the huge shape of a strange, unknown giant. But what was it? And where did it come from? Now comes a motion picture that explores this incredible mystery. Don't miss Sasquatch, rated G.
Now showing at the Embassy, 46th Street. Starts tomorrow throughout Greater New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Watch for this ad in your local newspaper.
But one thing that's kind of interesting with Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, is the setup is actually pretty prototypical of these old 70s Bigfoot movies, where it's kind of like the subgenre that doesn't exist anymore. They're kind of like, baby's first horror movie, where it's like you see a lot of kids that are like, oh, Legend of Boggy Creek, that's what got me into horror. It scared me so bad. Actually, Scott Shermer, who directed Found, Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, the poster for the movie is in Found, and he said that that's the movie that inspired him to get into horror. Because it's sort of like they're like nature documentaries mixed with, they're kind of like mockumentaries. So they went on to inspire, what's now kind of found footage. There's some comedy in it. They're all like PG rated, but there's also a monster running around doing some creepy things, but it's not really bloody. It's not really adult. You kind of get this as you're watching. It kind of could lull you in like maybe it's a 70s Disney nature documentary, but they just happen to be looking for Bigfoot, and on the way they see a cougar attack or they see a couple of bears fight or something. So you get this cool nature footage. But what I like about this movie about Sasquatch is instead of just kind of being that for a lot of it, which is why I prefer this to something like Legend of Boggy Creek, which that's like the seminal one. Most people will say like, oh, Legend of Boggy Creek, that's the best Bigfoot movie that'll ever be. And I think it is good and it's entertaining. I prefer Sasquatch just because I like that the characters kind of take a seat every now and then, and they sit around the campfire and they're like, oh, let's talk about what we're going to be up against. Let's talk about these true stories. So they get into, you see a reenactment of the Mount St. Helens attack, which is a nice action scene, about half an hour into the movie. And then you see the Bombin attack, which that whole story kind of inspired the name of Bill Oberst's character in my movie. Just tons of Bigfoot references for a Bigfoot geek in my movie. Yeah. But I like that those things kind of happen throughout, and you get this sort of history of the creature. And I think that this whole kind of docudrama style that these movies had is really cool, and it's something infinitely more interesting to me than found footage. I'll always take, something trying to be like a lost episode of Unsolved Mysteries than just like some dude with a camera looking around and it never cuts or whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm not a found footage fan at all. I think there's... I think there would be a way to do it as a documentary, more of a straight documentary that then ended up being really just a scary fantasy horror film. There would be a way to do that. And there's a way to tell a fictional story in the style of Abominable or Hunting Grounds or whatever. But this weird mix of both, because it's definitely filmed, parts of it are definitely filmed like a fictional drama, normal film. And then there's other parts of it that, like you say, are filmed like a nature documentary. At no point, though, is it filmed like a, documentary. At no point is it filmed, no one's talking to the screen. You get this endless voiceover from the lead character, but it's not... It's not documentary in a traditional sense that we would know. It's almost like they're like, well, we're making a movie, but our conceit is going to be that it's a documentary, but we're not really going to follow that through. It's just a movie. And we're going to have this weird conceit with this voiceover and nature footage and all this other stuff. But really, and it's sort of bizarre as well, because 2/3 of the movie is them traveling to the Valley of the Sasquatch, interesting enough, traveling to the place that the Native American refers to as the Valley of the Sasquatch. This is where all the Sasquatch sightings are, blah, 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 blah. And about halfway through, there's a plane that flies over and drops supplies and stuff. And I'm just kind of thinking to myself, wouldn't it have been easier for them to have just flown or got the helicopter to the Valley of the Sasquatch and started there, rather than spending 3 months going through... essentially, like you say, cougar attacks, bear attacks, the odd rocks coming down a mountainside that we don't know where it comes from. So it's interesting. The storyline dictates that for 2 to 3 months they have to be walking through these mountains. So it means that there's no real kind of Sasquatch action is going to happen fluidly in the film until the last third. So what they do, like you said, in order to make it an interesting movie, because we're told this Hollywood dictum is that every 10 minutes something has to happen. So every 8 to 10 minutes, like you say, it's either a cougar attack, the horses get stuck in a swamp, bears fight, or on 2 occasions they do this like mad flashback thing where they're all sat around a campfire and they tell the story, and then we get some... So that allows them to kind of crowbar Bigfoot into the beginning and middle of the movie, which they could have had Bigfoot all the way through the movie if they just landed the helicopter in the Valley of the Sasquatch to begin with.
Yeah, I guess it's so funny. That never really occurred to me, like the scientific reasoning for like why we need to make the trek the way we do. I mean, I guess it's because can you not fly pack horses? I mean, I guess they could have landed and with a big, like I'm just imagining like those military helicopters that you see in every Tony Scott movie.
Right.
Then they load the horses off with all the packs and stuff. But that is a good point. That didn't occur to me.
Well, they could have just gone to the valley and hiked the valley. I mean, once they show up to the valley, the Sasquatch goes, "No, you don't," and he shows up and starts like attacking them. So that would happen, I guess, if they. I mean, look, this is all with hindsight, and obviously I'm sort of half tongue in cheek, but.
No, but it is a good point. And one thing that's so interesting, so this movie was a really hard movie to find. For years, it was one of the only, like it's VHS only sort of movies. And then I think maybe about a decade ago, it came out in like a Bigfoot 3-pack that Retro Media put out with a couple of actually Yeti movies. So even though it was a Bigfoot 3-pack, there was only one Bigfoot movie.
And Yeti movies are then a subgenre of the Bigfoot movie, which is already a subgenre, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And actually the Yeti movies kicked it off. Yeti was kind of like what was sweeping the country before Bigfoot happened here, stateside.
Yeah. Well, yes, because even like you said in your, I think one of your lists is that even Hammer Horror did the Abominable Snowman with Peter Cushing years before this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the 50s, I believe. And that's another really cool movie. But so Sasquatch was really hard to find. It came out in that 3-pack, but just randomly late last year, Code Red put this out on a Blu Ray double feature, which of course, if you know Code Red, that means that you're going to have to look at a bunch of different websites that they own or like Diabolique. And, maybe you'll find it and it'll be up for sale or the website will even be operable at that specific moment. It's very hard to get Code Red movies now that they're not going through traditional retailers. But so, they put this movie out on a double feature with this kind of another paranormal documentary called Encounters with the Unknown, which I haven't gotten a chance to watch yet. But one thing that's so cool about the Blu-ray is that for the first time since theaters, which this was a movie, like this was low budget. It never had a big distributor. It was four-walled by the producers. So if you were seeing it in a theater, it was because the filmmaker brought the print themselves and they were out in the lobby selling the soundtrack and selling posters and stuff. That was the only theatrical release it got. And so what Code Red found was an actual reel that opened the film. It's a 6-minute, they call it a Bigfoot intro on the Blu-ray menu. And what it is it's sort of like a primer for Bigfoot, which I mean, the movie sort of does in its own time, but because it's like this 6-minute thing, it actually has more encounters. This was kind of like a legendary lost thing for years because there had been like a publicity still of like a little Native American boy running away from a Sasquatch. And people were like, that's not in the movie. What is that? Are there other attack scenes that they didn't show or flashbacks or whatever? And that it's from this introduction where it's a different narrator than the narrator of the movie. And he's just like talking about the history of this mysterious creature. And then there's a bunch of reenactments crammed into this opening 6 minutes. And I kind of think like having that, and if they had found a way to weave it into the narrative of the movie, it would have been like the ultimate experience, because I think it kind of might be a bit too much up front. Of course, if you find the movie really slow, it's good to get a bunch of that stuff up front, but I kind of like the way they slowly dole it out. So maybe, if instead of 2 flashbacks, there was like 4 flashbacks and they use some of this footage from the opening, that could have been something where it would have kept the pace going. And so that's why I definitely recommend people check out that Blu-ray if they're interested in Bigfoot movies or they've seen this before and liked it.
Yeah, I mean, there are, don't get me wrong, there's some good things going for this movie. I mean, it is a slower pace, but I mean, it's the 70s. Most films you watch from that decade are going to be of a slower pace, and I'm not against that overall. I think the photography is, even in the scratchy kind of version I watched, the photography is very good. And, the animal sequences that they get to play with are very well done. Obviously, I like beards and huge beards, and there's plenty of great beards on show here. Some of the humor is great. There's 2 characters in particular. You've got Josh Bixby, played by Ken Kenzel, who is like he's the last of the mountain men, as we're told in the voiceover. And then who is the like clumsy?
You're gonna say the cook. All I know is that his middle name is Aloysius.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But he's incredible. The clumsy cook who kind of looks like the bass player for Sam and Dave before his hair grew long. but he's got one of those like ginger mustaches, which I quite admire. And then the last character who really was doing something for me was the grumpy New York photographer who was like, there's no Bigfoot. And you think, like, the funny thing is the best thing about the first 10 minutes of the movie is it sets up all these like mad characters, and the voiceover is really one step away from being a genuine mockumentary. Like, it's one step away from putting jokes in there. I think they know they're being funny. I don't think that they're naive to the fact that they're being a little silly or a little overly straight-faced, let's just say. But no, the Mountain Men with the pipe and the beard, and there's also that there's his best moment is his silhouette. There's a great silhouette of him like puffing on his pipe with the mountains in the background, which I was a big particular fan of. And it's funny you mentioned the soundtrack earlier. This is probably back in the day when there was a lot of unemployed xylophone players and like flute and woodwind players, because they all seem to be given jobs on this film. Whenever there was a comedy in quotation marks sequence, you get like the like the little xylophone flute twiddly-dee, like almost Benny Hill style, almost like whoops, here goes the comedy bit, happening.
And then there's also that the amazing theme song. It was like the era of the theme song for a movie. So over the end credits, we get the song "High in the Mountains" that's about the legend of Bigfoot in folk song form.
Oh, yeah, and who doesn't love a good lilting folk song from the 70s? It's always a wonder, the best way to end a movie. It's up there now for me with the My Bloody Valentine folk song, which is just incredible. But no, in this one, that is the one place in this movie where they kind of give empathy to the Bigfoot, because isn't the folk song at the end over the credits, doesn't it talk about like we should have left him alone and don't go into his valley?
He just wants to be left alone, all that kind of stuff, for sure. But in the movie, he's just like a monster.
Right, yeah, the movie just shows up and like rips a guy's shoulder and, scratches a guy's face and stuff, hurts a guy's leg. But I've found this movie to be... I certainly found it to be interesting. I did find it to be a little quaint. It is kind of quaint now with hindsight. I have to confess, like, the Bigfoot subgenre is one of those things that every time I've dipped into it, and I've probably dipped into it sort of 3 or 4 times in my life of watching kind of horror movies and monster movies, I'm always sort of 8 times out of 10 disappointed, because like you say, there aren't very many good ones, and you kind of go, well, why aren't there very many good ones? You could certainly, because people go, well, you need special effects, you need a monster suit, and they kind of go, but you don't. Like, if you're clever about it, I mean, yes, everyone wants to see the money shot right at the end, so maybe you need some form of mask or dripping fangs or claws or something, but like, ultimately, you could still make a scary movie about the idea of Bigfoot without having to show him, like, lolloping about. And now, in your film, like I say, I think they have a really interesting kind of caveman look to it, and certainly in Abominable, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's far more a proper monster, rubber-faced, like, fangs and big eyes and mad hair and everything. Like, it's a proper, fairly decent budgeted monster suit. But I still think you could make a scary movie about a monster in the woods without necessarily having to show it for, all through the movie. And yet, like you say, there are so few good ones, I think, from what I've come across. And I've only probably watched about 10 or 12. But out of that 10 or 12, I can only think of 2 or 3 that I really love.
Yeah, I think what it is this is a subgenre that really like rides on waves. And so I think in the 70s, it's really like Legend of Boggy Creek was like this big drive-in hit. This was a movie that was made for a couple $100,000 that made like 20 million back in the early 70s. Like it was a huge deal. It was like the Blair Witch Project of its day. And that was a movie where it was filmmakers who had never made a film before. They were like commercial kind of filmmakers. And so they started this kind of mockumentary style. And that's a movie where if you felt the style was kind of wishy-washy in Sasquatch-the-Legend of Bigfoot, Legend of Boggy Creek really sticks to it's got interview subjects that are talking to the camera. It's very much a fake documentary, a docudrama, I like to call it.
Yeah.
But it also has things like the folk songs, because I don't know, I guess that was a thing in the 70s. I wasn't around then, but every movie had its kind of song. But so actually in Legend of Boggy Creek, the movie will stop at a couple of moments to have like these montages set to songs. And like I think in Sasquatch it works a bit better because it's saved for the ending. But it'll be something where it's like, what kind of movie am I watching? Like I just saw a crazy reenactment of an attack scene and an interviewer talking about, Bigfoot might be the missing link. And then all of a sudden it's a bunch of swamp footage with this happy song about like this mountain man, or there's also a happy song about like the creature itself. But so I think what happened was because Legend of Boggy Creek hit so big, that's what every almost 70s Bigfoot movie was kind of doing. And so that's why you have these strange kind of, you can't quite put your finger on what they're going for. Are they going for mockumentary? Are they going for found footage or whatever, like Sasquatch does? And it's because they were just like, well, let's just do what Boggy Creek did. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of those things where I think Sasquatch, it's very obviously a ripoff. There's a lot of elements in it that are taken directly from Legend of Boggy Creek. But I think it's like Friday the 13th. Like it's a ripoff, but it's a good ripoff. So I still enjoy it. So that's something where I think in the 70s Bigfoot movies, they were really towing the line of, well, it's not really horror. It's sort of like this real thing, so we need to present it with like a foot in reality. And then the 80s, I think Harry and the Hendersons ruined Bigfoot horror, which I still think Harry and the Hendersons is a fine movie.
Sure.
It's probably one of the best Bigfoot movies, like top 5 Bigfoot movies. But it made it so that everyone saw, oh, that's Bigfoot. He's goofy and we love him. I mean, it inspired a TV show, which a lot of people don't remember now. I think like Bruce Davison from Willard was the lead in the TV show for a couple of seasons.
Yeah.
And so that kind of made it so the 90s were full of like little Bigfoot and To Catch a Yeti and like little kid movies like that. And so you had to kind of work hard in the 2000s, which is when Abominable came about, where all of a sudden, I think it was really like Sci-Fi Channel was like, hey, we need to recognizable monsters. Another thing is it's Bigfoot's in the public domain. You don't have to pay anyone to make a movie with Bigfoot, yet it's a universally recognized thing. And let's crank out some movies about it. And so that's when we started getting into the more like savage Sasquatch. And there are older movies that exist. Night of the Demon from 1980 is a really fun one if all you're looking for is gore and you want to see like, you don't care if the movie itself is terrible, as long as there's blood and guts, Night of the Demon's the movie for you. It's really entertaining. But yeah, it's just a hard thing. I'm not, as someone who made a Bigfoot horror movie, it's even hard for me to articulate like, well, why doesn't it work all the time where you get this really good movie? And I can say maybe why they don't get seen as much, but that doesn't really answer the question of why they're not made better. But I think a lot of people, like I am someone who loves Bigfoot. If it's Bigfoot, I will seek it out. I think a lot of people, and maybe it's because of that Harry and the Hendersons thing, I think it's kind of quaint, or they're like, what? Bigfoot? Why would we be interested in that? And I know that just from speaking personally with how Hunting Grounds is getting out there. Like we've talked about, like it was called Valley of the Sasquatch. It played in festivals, over the course of the last 2 years as Valley of the Sasquatch. But then when it came time to like sell it to distributors, we're like, hey, we're winning awards. We're getting these great reviews. Do you want our movie? They're like, well, no, it's called Valley of the Sasquatch. We don't want a Bigfoot movie. And so then we finally found a distributor in Uncorked who is supporting the film and really getting behind it. But they're like, you can't let people know it's a Bigfoot movie because they're going to think it's lame. The retailers aren't going to want to buy it. And it's something we're now learning. We were like, what are you talking about? But at that point, it had been like years. And so we're like, yeah, we want to get this movie out here. We're fine retitling it. And Hunting Grounds, is a much better retitle than something like The Invoking. At least Hunting Grounds sounds like a real movie title.
Right. And it at least if I watch a movie called Hunting Grounds, and I put in your movie, I'm not disappointed because, they are, in a hunting area. They do stay in a hunting cabin. There are people talking about hunting. But at the same time, it can also refer to the Bigfoots who are hunting them. You know what I mean? And it's totally fine.
Exactly.
But
yeah, so that's something that we realized, though, because even like something like Redbox, Uncorked told us, hey, we're going to have this limited run Redbox, but it's going to be kind of more of a trial thing because they realized it was a Bigfoot movie and they don't like Bigfoot. And, Walmart didn't want to carry it because it's a Bigfoot thing. And in my mind, I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense because like Finding Bigfoot is like the biggest TV show that Animal Planet's ever had. But then again, maybe what I interpret the popularity of Animal Planet being is like, wrong, like I'm overinflating it or something. But it's this bizarre thing where like when we were making the movie, like everyone we talked to about it was like, oh, my uncle saw Bigfoot, my aunt saw Bigfoot, they heard something weird in the woods. Everyone got excited, everyone knew what Bigfoot was, and it made them interested in the movie. But for whatever reason, retailers, or maybe money talks, maybe other things have done bad previously, but they just don't think Bigfoot's like this viable thing.
Yeah, which it's sort of baffling to me because, yeah, like you say, it's if it was a vampire movie or a werewolf movie or, any kind of, hell, I even think like a Loch Ness movie or something, like it would be fine. But, yeah, it's odd that a Bigfoot movie doesn't get out there. And in terms of sort of people going back, people listening to this who are like, well, I kind of am interested in monster movies and I like this, that, and everything, but I haven't dipped my toe in Bigfoot films. I would say this about the 70s ones. First of all, I think it depends what you grew up with, but I'll go back to that point. But first of all, it's like anyone who loves Lost Boys, Dusk Till Dawn, Near Dark, Interview with a Vampire, anything like that, I would strongly urge them to go back and watch either the Hammer Draculas or the Bela Lugosi Dracula from Universal, and even Nosferatu and things like that. Just because I kind of think if you love those monsters, you should really kind of be interested in where they came from and how have we told the story previously and da-da-da-da-da. However, I think that if all you've done is grown up with Dusk Till Dawn, Near Dark, Lost Boys, and so on, these more loud, colorful, bombastic, violent, gore, bloodletting kind of vampire films, going back and watching Hammer's The Horror of Dracula, or going back and watching the Bela Lugosi one, you certainly will get lots out of it, but you'll also be like, oh, that was quaint. You know what I mean? They wore funny costumes and spoke in, interesting English and, whatever it is. And there wasn't a lot of blood and there wasn't a lot of exploitation in it. And, it's quaint and interesting, but come on, give me all the fangs and gore and sex and all the rest of it that comes with Dracula. And I think similarly with Bigfoot movies, is that, if all you've seen is a film like Abominable, which we'll get onto now, if you go back and, the bigger, gorier, more modern feeling monster movies, to go back to something like Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot, you are going to be like, oh, and I said it, it's quaint. And I meant it more in the sense that it's in the 70s. Like you say, it's full of folksy music. There's some sort of ham-fisted comedy sequences with xylophone music. Like, it's just, it is in that regard. But I still think if you want to dip your toe in Bigfoot movies, you have to go back and watch that. You have to go back and watch The Legend of Boggy Creek, Creature from Black Lake, films like that where you need to kind of see where kind of the monster came from and where it evolves to. And I think there is worth in that. And I think that's if you're fascinated by filmmaking and fascinated by monster movies, that's kind of what you have to do. You can't just start with King Kong Skull Island. Go back to the original 1930s King Kong. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. Especially with that specific reference. Like, I had a King Kong marathon before Skull Island came. And Skull Island was fine, but it's like still the King Kong that was made in 1933 is the best King Kong, and it's like by far.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, Skull Island was fine because the monsters were great. The problem with Skull Island, and I think it's the benefit of your movies versus a movie like Skull Island, is that the human characters were nothing, like absolutely nothing. Like, okay, Samuel L. Jackson had something of a character and something of like an impetus to what he ended up doing, and John C. Reilly was a good comic relief, but everyone else was as bland as wallpaper. There was nothing to them. They were nondescript. vague. Even Hiddleston and Brie, Everything Larson, even those two were just like ciphers. Neither of them had any kind of character. They tried to like imbue Hiddleston with some mystery at the beginning where he's like, he'll never go home and he'll never find. I'm like, yeah, I don't buy this for a second. The guy looks like he's just stepped out of a Gap advert, so I don't.
The After Movie Diner with John Cross will return right after this.
What's up, guys? Be sure to check out Now That I'm Older on the Rogue Intel Podcast Network. Me and Kenny sit down and talk about how getting older sucks, but can be awesome at the exact same time. We also look at pop culture, review a few movies, share some personal stories, and just basically poke fun at the world around us. Be sure to check out Now That I'm Older on the Rogue Intel Podcast Network.
Hey there, it's Chris from More Gooder Than, where we rate and dissect pop culture one argument at a time. I'm joined by my compadres, Corey Sasso.
What it is, home trees.
And Donnie the Big D Carr.
Que mas?
For those of you that would be joining us for the first time, Corey, Donnie, and I each take the side of some piece of pop culture and try and sway the world to agree with our opinions on which one is most goodest, with a 100% money-back guarantee to entertain you in the process. So we've done which is goodest out of the Indiana Jones trilogy.
We've also covered the twin film phenomenon like Armageddon and Deep Impact.
We've also compared and contrasted excellent Bill Paxton performances.
So if that's something that you guys like to enjoy, check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, and our website, mgtpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at mgtpodcast. Thanks, and check us out.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling.
Yeah, that's something as far as like interesting characters that I think like Abominable pulls off in spades. And so this would be one where I think like if you have listeners that haven't really seen any Bigfoot movies, they're just like, well, I don't know if I'm going to really be into this or not, especially if like you don't believe in Bigfoot. I think that could be a big thing as well. As many people that are like, oh, I want to see this movie because I love Bigfoot. There's just as many people that are like, I don't want to watch that. I don't believe in Bigfoot.
Right.
So I would say, no matter what your attitude is, if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen these movies, I would actually recommend watching Abominable because for me, it's the best of the Bigfoot movies, modern, 70s, whatever. So it's because the subgenre does have kind of so much dreck in it. I would say like if you don't dig Abominable, it's okay. Don't bother.
Yeah, of course. I completely agree. You've probably been noticing during this Bigfoot-O-Rama that I have been playing the trailers of all the Bigfoot movies we've been discussing. Of course, typically when I do this, I come across a trailer like the trailer for Abominable, which is an abominable trailer for a really good movie. In other words, it's pretty crap, and it's mostly silent with captions and not a lot of voiceover or plot or anything like that. So I will be providing the voiceover to the Abominable trailer coming up now. An uninspiring shot of a mountain. It has been sighted 42,000 times in 68 countries. Trees. A creature of myth and legend known by dozens of names. Empty cave. Wild man. Yowie. Yeti. Almas. Nungloko. Sasquatch. Bigfoot. We've hunted it for years. Lance Henriksen. But what happens? Jeffrey Combs. Naked Tiffany Shepard. When it decides. Matt McCoy from Police Academy. To hunt us. Haley Joel, not Osmond.
There is something out there.
It's coming.
Abominable. Abominable to me is the Bigfoot movie that if you grew up in the 80s watching 80s horror films, you should love. Like, there's nothing in Abominable that you won't like. It's got the slasher setup of the co-eds who are all going to be renting a cabin in the hills. It's got great creature effects, plenty of gore. It's got the cameo-centric with D. Wallace Stone and Jeffrey Combs and Lance Henriksen and people like that. You've got a modern up-and-coming Scream Queen, Tiffany Shepard, shows up in it. And if you were, like I was, a fan of the Police Academy series, you've got good old reliable Matt McCoy. Who, funny enough, the Daily Grindhouse friends of ours were doing a whole series of Police Academy articles recently, and they actually had an article that was like, Matt McCoy, the budget Steve Guttenberg, that like whatever happened to Matt McCoy, and he shows up in like the odd genre thing. He's interesting. But how did you first come across Abominable?
Well, this movie is interesting because I came up with the idea for what was at the time Valley of the Sasquatch back when I was leaving film school. So I graduated in like August of 2006. And when I left school, I was like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to write a script. That's going to be the first thing I do before I move to the city and try to get jobs on set and stuff like that. And so I was going to write my Night of the Living Dead with Bigfoot script. And then I heard rumblings, like I had my outline all planned out, but then I heard rumblings like, oh, Sci-Fi Channel is going to premiere this Bigfoot movie called Abominable. And I didn't have TV, like basic cable or whatever when I was up in Canada. And so I missed it when it aired. But then it was coming out on DVD, I think that October. So it was like, I heard about this movie and I was like, oh shit, what if it's like the Bigfoot movie? It's got Jeffrey Combs. It's going to premiere on Sci-Fi. I'm sure this is going to be like the greatest thing ever. It was very like, I don't know, insecure. I hadn't written the script yet. I was like, oh, what if this just totally steals the thunder from my movie? Never mind that my movie didn't come out for a decade and no one really remembers Abominable. But that's like the kind of headspace you get into, I guess, as a creative. You're worried that everything's better and it's going to steal the thunder or what have you. And so I finished like the first draft of my script in the time between graduating and when Abominable came out on DVD. So I went out and I rented it. The first thing, Hollywood Video still existed back then. So I just went into Hollywood Video that morning in October and I rented it and I watched it and I thought it was really good. And it was nothing like my movie. So I was like, oh, good. That's great. I don't have to worry about this. But that was really it. I had seen like, the rumblings online had been like, oh, it's a new Bigfoot movie. It's got a practical creature, which I thought that was really cool. I'd seen plenty of terrible CGI Bigfoot movies in the early 2000s.
Yeah, never CGI a creature in a low budget movie. If you can't, like I say, you either do creative shooting and do like I suggested before and kind of do it like they did with Halloween, the first Halloween, where Michael Myers isn't really seen until the end, and just kind of show like a hand here or the back of a head here or a foot here or whatever you can manage, or don't do it. CGI, like the sci-fi CGI, the Asylum movies. Ugh,
yeah.
I cannot, they're abominable. They really are. Anyway, sorry. Back to...
No problem. And so like that stuff was getting me interested. And then it also has an amazing poster by Drew Struzan, which is like one of the great modern monster movie posters ever. And so I was like, wow, that's freaking amazing that they got that, Drew Struzan to draw a poster. That's so good. And then I realized the reason why was because the director, Ryan Schifrin, who unfortunately has not gone on to make another feature. The only thing he did was about a decade after this came out is he has a segment in Tales of Halloween, the segment that John Landis stars in. But Ryan Schifrin is the son of Lalo Schifrin, the composer from Amityville Horror and all these famous 70s movies. So that's another thing where it's like recapturing that really 70s, 80s kind of feel because he got his dad to do the score for this movie. So it's like this low budget Bigfoot version of Rear Window with a Lalo Schifrin score, all these cameos, and a poster by Drew Struzan. Like, I was super excited about it. And I don't think the movie didn't disappoint. It's not like, top 10 horror of all time, but for me, it's very much the comfort Bigfoot movie. It's just fun. It's got good characters. I think Matt McCoy does a really good job. I think the cameos are great. Jeffrey Combs is insane in this movie. Like that, apparently he just showed up with that look and he based it like on one of his uncles, like with the oxygen tank and chain smoking and the long scraggly hair.
Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, watch this movie for him and Lance Henriksen talking the Sasquatch around a fire, if nothing else. because it's a true joy. The one cameo I forgot to mention in my rundown, which is kind of heinous considering what a fan of the guy I am, is the wonderful Paul Gleason, who I must have missed in the credits at the beginning of the movie, because when he showed up in the movie, I was like, wait, Paul Gleason's in this film? Like I hadn't even seen him, because interestingly enough, they kind of do all the cameos at the very end of the credits. You get all the main credits, and then you have with Lance Henriksen and with Jeffrey Combs, I always wanted the and introducing credit, but sadly I'm probably too old at this point. You have to be like a child normally to have like the and introducing credit. But no, it's a fantastic cast, and even the main cast, which is Matt McCoy, and then the guy who plays his nurse, who is that?
So that is a guy by the name of Christian Tinsley, and he's only acted in one other movie, but you've actually seen a bunch of stuff that he's done because he is an effects artist. Right. And he did the effects of this movie, which is why his character's, spoiler alert, I mean, he's the jerk character, something's going to happen. His character's demise is like one of the great effects of the 2000s, I think. I totally love it. And the design of the Bigfoot, that's all his doing. He worked on the effects team for things like The Passion of the Christ. Like, he's like a big time makeup effects artist, and he's probably friends with the director, and was like, the director was thinking, maybe it's the same reason Eli Roth is in Inglourious Basterds, like, oh, this character kind of fits your personality, let's just have you be in it. Yeah, and I think he's great in it, actually. I would have assumed he was an actor. Like, I would have assumed he was an actor in lots of stuff. I thought he was really great. I mean, yeah, he plays the sort of annoying bully antagonist character that these films tend to have. But he does it well, and him and Matt McCoy play off each other well. I think that if there's any negativity towards this film, it's really down to the fact that it's very pacey and well-paced and speedy and quick and wham, bam, and thank you. But it's very kind of light on really building up any tensions or character tensions or anything like that. I mean, we kind of know what happened to Matt McCoy, and we kind of know why he's being dragged back up to the cabin, and we sort of understand, like, what's going on and why he has a nurse with him and da-da-da-da-da. But it's not... I don't know. I don't feel that throughout the movie. You know what I mean? And I kind of feel to me like either have him in a wheelchair and go, oh yeah, he just had an accident and he's in a wheelchair and he happens to be in this cabin, boom, hit the ground running, or really go into it. You know what I mean? Like, I found it didn't really do either. Yeah, it's not really the most in-depth character study, but I think his storyline comes off the best. I think where I kind of see some weakness, and it's by design of the style of the movie. Like, obviously, I mentioned before, this was a movie that was inspired by Rear Window. Instead of having Raymond Burr be the villain, you have Bigfoot. And so in the direction of the movie, everything is from Matt McCoy's point of view, and it's not like a gimmicky, like the Maniac remake kind of thing, but when you're seeing like the girls across the way, you don't really get into their lives because you're only going to get as far as he can see with his binoculars. It's always going to be he looks out the window and then you see a scene of them in kind of a wide shot of like what he's seeing. And that makes it so that their story is very underdeveloped. They're very kind of just like types. It's like, oh, it's this group of hot girls are going to be over there. Of course they are, because we have to have, the body count and then also the skin and stuff like that. And it's fun. It's not like this giant negative, but it just does make it so it just feels kind of basic, and like the character interaction and even the way the characters can interact. Like when the shit starts going down, he's trying to get their attention, and half the movie is he can't. And so it's just like a guy basically by himself. Sometimes his male nurse is there, and they interact, but it's a guy trying to talk to the other, big group of characters in the movie, and he can't. And whenever he sees the monster, even if the monster is attacking one of them, it's like it's at a distance. And so it's this interesting kind of thing. I really can appreciate the directorial style and that kind of instinct of let's be in his shoes at all times, but I think it kind of comes at the detriment of the other characters.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's funny because I'm looking here and it says that it's, just over an hour and a half. I could have sworn it was like 60 minutes. You know, I mean, that's how fast it is. It kind of starts, they get up there, you get your Jeffrey Combs, you get your Lance Henriksen, and then once Bigfoot shows up, we're off to the races, and that's kind of it. You know, you have the interesting, because like the phone system goes down, and the internet goes down, or the cell phones don't work, or something like that, and then he attempts to reach them by laptop. Like, you get him attempting to reach the police by laptop a couple of times, but that's about it. And then, you know, we're off to him looking out the window while Bigfoot, you know, tears through this house, destroying naked co-eds wherever he can. And then, you know, the last section of the film is Matt McCoy and Haley Joel, not Osment, just Haley Joel, who's actually a woman. Who I'm sorry, like Haley Joel, I'm sure you're great. You were fine in this movie, a good scream queen, but yeah, I would change the name because people are just gonna be like, wait a minute, it's not Haley Joel Osment. You know, that's just confusing to me. But no, she's great. But you know, then it just cuts to her and a semi. Paralyzed Matt McCoy trying to get into a car and get away from Bigfoot, and then it's over. Like, you know, it really is like that. It's
got like a good economy that I think the best kind of low budget horror movies do. And I think that's even like by design of the plot. It's, you know, the same thing we did with Cedar Ridge. I think Ryan Schifrin didn't have a huge budget, and he talks about that. I have the old Anchor Bay DVD, and there's a booklet in there where he kind of talks about, you know, we didn't have a ton of money. So I was thinking about the best minimal location movies, and that's where the Rear Window idea came about. And so I kind of like the economic storytelling of it. And you're right, it goes by really fast. And so it might not be the deepest movie you've ever seen, but at the very least, it's not boring, which might be a worse sin for a movie to be as boring than to not have like amazing depth.
100% agree. 100% agree. And I wasn't, you know, I was only saying it like, you know, just to provide balance, because otherwise I would just be saying this is 90 minutes of like fun, awesome. This is, to me, this is what the straight to DVD and or straight to streaming and or straight to Sci-Fi Channel movies should be. They should all be this kind of film. No one's tuning into them expecting them to be masterpieces, because they either don't necessarily have the talent or the time or the budget or whatever. There's multiple things they don't have in order to really make them huge, great, sprawling masterpieces, whatever that means. Because I equally like Evil Dead 2, and that was made in a school gymnasium for peanuts. But I think they should all aspire to be this kind of thing. In other words, have a good reason for the story you're telling, and then put in a monster and actually give us the goods, and then get out quickly as you came in. Like, I think that would be a really good benchmark. And too much of the time, I'm seeing more the kind of what was the one like Cowboys versus Raptors kind of film, where it's CGI dinosaurs and a bunch of Eric Roberts shows up for 30 seconds because he shows up in every fucking movie for 30 seconds, and and then there's a bunch of CGI stuff, and they don't do the gore because it has to show on TV, and they don't do the nudity because it has to show on TV, and you just kind of go, well, what's the point? This is an exploitation movie without exploitation in it and shitty CGI. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You're either making an exploitation movie, in which case go ahead and make one, give me tits and gore and monsters, or don't. And I think the thing that Abominable did that really surprised me and made me happy was, I'm like, that's it. This is great. This is like an 80s monster movie. It's got the same kind of glossy sheen that something like a Reanimator or an Evil Dead 2 or Nightmare on Elm Street 3 or 4 has. It has like that nice glossy kind of produced look. It has a good strong monster. It has some nudity, and it has some good violence and action in it. Like, that's, and like you say, it wasn't a big budget movie. Okay, he's called in a bunch of favors. There's some nepotism in there, but like I say, you can get Eric Roberts or Lance Henriksen or Jeffrey Combs or Ted Raimi to show up for a day, or even a Bill Oberst Jr., right? You can get them to show up for a few days and do some great work. So, like, there's really no excuse why even something like the big franchise that sci-fi has, Sharknado, which everyone loves, is so shit. Like, there's no real reason why that film is so abominably awful.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I have to point out if people haven't seen this before or haven't really heard of it. When I say that it first premiered on Sci-Fi Channel, and that's how I first heard about it, this is one of those movies where back in the mid-2000s, Sci-Fi would sometimes premiere indie movies or movies from the UK that didn't have U.S. distribution. Yeah, the first time anyone stateside would see them would be on Sci-Fi, but they were not Sci-Fi Channel originals, which now, like, everything the Asylum does is pumped into those Sci-Fi Channel originals, so they have really, like, a negative connotation. Like everything you're saying, John, I totally agree with. Those are not kind of my kind of monster movies, but Abominable and also Dog Soldiers was the same way. In the U.S., people first saw them as sci-fi original movies, but they were real movies to begin with that were then all of the kind of good bits were cut out because it was a TV network showing. And then a couple months later, you got the uncut version on DVD. So if people just want, like, this is a perfect, like, Joe Bob Briggs movie. Like, you know, the bloods, beasts, and breasts, you're going to get a lot of really cool gore scenes. You're going to get the Tiffany Shepis nude scene, and you're going to get a Bigfoot that looks like Stacy Keach, and it's like all in one movie.
He did look like Stacy Keach. That was tremendous. Or MC Gainey is the other one who also looks like Stacy Keach. And then Powers Booth. I swear they're the same people. I think MC Gainey, Powers Booth, and Stacy Keach are all from the same gene pool. But yeah, he did look like that, and that was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, I think that both movies that you suggested, I'm really glad they were 30 years apart exactly, which I think is great. Kind of shows, and they both showed like two completely different attempts at a Bigfoot story. And I think what's really nice about Hunting Grounds and or Valley of the Sasquatch, which is still the title I'm sure you prefer and I prefer, just because it has that like ring to it. The thing that's nice about that movie is that it sits between the two of them. So it is a modern movie. You do get your gore factor, you do get your violence, you do get your modern characters and all the rest of it. But and it is glossy and well photographed and has a good premise. But you also get more of that 70s characterization. It's a slower build. It's more about the people and the dialogue and the shots and all the rest of it. So I think it plays well between the two. And I certainly think if you're going to do what I did yesterday and watch all three, in a weird way, I would put Sasquatch in first, then I would put in Hunting Grounds, and then I would end with Abominable, because Abominable is your midnight movie. You know what I mean? Like it's your late night, I don't have to think about this anymore, tits and gore movie. And Hunting Grounds is more like that nice evening movie where you're like, okay, there's more going on here, and there's good characterization, but by the time we get to the end, you've got arms being ripped off and blood flying everywhere and da-da-da-da-da, which plays nicely into Abominable. And then you have your afternoon movie, which is your Sasquatch movie, which is all like daylight and twiddly-dee and xylophone music, you know? And I think
I think that's an awesome triple feature for sure. And I totally agree with you as far as the placing of Hunting Grounds, because that was a movie where we played at a ton of festivals. We had a great festival run. It was really awesome to go around all these different places. But we had a couple of midnight screenings where we were like the midnight monster movie, and I was like, this is not a midnight movie. Like, people are going to fall asleep.
Right.
And the people who stuck it out, you know, they enjoyed it, but I was like, the crowds were less than if you had an Abominable be in that same slot.
Right. And no, completely. And but that's not to its detriment. It's just to say that they're two different films. I happen to actually like them both equally. I couldn't really tell you which one I prefer, but they are two different styles. There are certain similarities between all three, but there are definitely different styles, and that's fine. That should be acknowledged, and that should be that also shows just what you can do with the kind of Bigfoot myth and or the kind of creature feature. There are multiple ways to do it, and I think that the nice thing about that trilogy as well, or those three films put together as well, is that each one takes a completely different style and tack with the subject matter. And, you know, you can watch 40, 50 Bigfoot movies and not find three that are sort of as watchable and as fun and as strong as those three. So, I was very happy with sitting there and doing that yesterday. I just, like I say, I watched Hunting Grounds last yesterday, which was also totally fine. That totally worked. I actually watched it after Lion, of all films. We watched the first two Bigfoot movies, and then my lady was like, can we put on another film? I was like, sure. What do you want to watch? She was like, well, Lion's available for rent. So I watched Lion, which was great, but that's a real tearjerker, very emotional, true story drama with no monsters in it at all, except Google. And then I went back to Hunting Grounds. So it was interesting yesterday, but it all worked.
That's awesome. I'm glad that Hunting Grounds held up, the same way it did when you saw it a couple years ago, even coming after an Oscar-nominated movie like Lion. That makes me feel good.
No, it did, because it's like, well, I've got the family drama. I've just watched 2 hours of a family drama, and then here comes the monster just to wrap up my night. It works. It works that way. I have a very eclectic taste. I can kind of watch a bit of everything, but I would certainly suggest to people who are interested in Bigfoot films to check out these three. And I would definitely suggest to people that I know what it's like when you're looking through Netflix stuff, or you're looking through Redbox, or you're looking through Walmart, whatever it is, and there's these box sets of 20 films, and it's like 20 horror films, or 20 action films, or 20 monster movies, or whatever it is, and you look on the back, you're like, yeah, but how many of these are actually any good? It can be really, really difficult to pick those things out. But I can definitely say that the Invoking, the Device, and Hunting Grounds are definitely, if you see them, or if you can rent them or watch them or purchase them, I strongly recommend it, because I enjoyed all three in their own way. And the thing that comes out, I think, the most out of all of them, although they're all well shot and acted, is the writing. I think the writing is very strong, and that would be you, sir.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm glad that there are people like you who are on our wavelength. You make films to kind of get the kind of stories you want to see out there, put out something, personal to you into the world, and just hope that other people can, chew on it the same way you do. And so it's very, rewarding. That's the whole reason why we do it, is to hear things like that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, no, completely, sir. And I think I hopefully said it in my, I haven't rewatched my video review of it actually, but I think I hopefully said it in my video review as well, which everyone can find. If you're interested in those three movies and want a little bit more from me on them, you can certainly find that on aftermoviediner.com under the video section. That is up there already. And so that just remains to kind of say, okay, is there anything more that you wanted to kind of say about Hunting Grounds, the making of it, or its release, and where people can find it and what people should look out for?
Yeah, just I'm really proud of the movie. It was the first movie I got the chance to direct, and as you heard in my story of the making of it, it was the first real script I wrote after film school, and it was this kind of passion project that I'd been thinking about in one way or another, like my whole life, being fascinated by Bigfoot as a kid. And it's like some people, like Scorsese, will go 20, 40 years before they get to do their passion project. And it's like I got to do it right out of the gate. And, maybe it's because like my dreams are so small, like it worked out. But I just feel very lucky that the first movie out of the gate was the first thing I wrote. And it's something I feel so passionately about. And it's so kind of like uniquely me. Like when I tell people, oh, I directed a movie, it's coming out. And they're like, and I say it's about Bigfoot, they're like, oh, that makes sense. And so, yeah, May 2nd is when people can get it, start your summer season off right. It'll be on Blu Ray and DVD. The DVD will be available from some rental markets like Redbox, like Family Video. But for purchase, it's really only on Amazon. And the Blu Ray is only available on Amazon. And that one actually has some more special features than the DVD. Something that we, the October people, like to do is put together good special features packages. I'm addicted to physical media and listening to commentaries and stuff. So if you pick up that Blu-ray, you're going to get everything that's on the DVD, which is a commentary by the October people and a feature-length documentary about the making of the film. We interview everybody involved with it. But the Blu-ray has a couple of exclusives. It has some deleted scenes, so you'll see how we originally planned out the beginning of the film. There's a couple of deleted characters, and kind of the timeline of the opening was a lot different, and it changed in editing. So that was a good kind of learning experience. In my head for so long, the story story of how the father and son got to the cabin played out in a certain way, but then in editing we realized it was kind of convoluted, and so we just had to really simplify it. And then also there's a really fun featurette on there where I go on a squatching trip for the first time, and I go into the Washington rainforest where there's been a lot of sightings, and my guide is Paul Malik, aka Dormarth, who runs the physical media zine Dormarth's Horror Reviews, and you've seen him in documentaries like Rewind This and Adjust Your Tracking. He's kind of this heavy metal horror VHS and Bigfoot enthusiast, and so he's my guide on this first trek to try to find Sasquatch.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm just looking now on Amazon. So all the films, it looks like, are available to rent if you have an Amazon subscription. The Invoking is also available on DVD. And I'm just looking up. The Device is that also available on DVD? I'm just looking now.
It is, yeah. All of them are on DVD, and you can get them all on Amazon VOD. They're all on iTunes, things like that.
Nice, excellent. And don't forget that if you are making a purchase or a rental from Amazon for this release, please do click through the banner on aftermoviediner.com first. It doesn't take any money out of John's pocket, and it doesn't take any money out of your pocket, but it will give us just a few cents for everyone who does that. So that would be a great way to support the show while also supporting John's excellent movies. So please do click through the Amazon banner if you're purchasing any of these on Amazon, which I do strongly suggest. And there's two more questions, sir, I have for you before we head out. The first one is, will there be plans to do an October People box set with all three on, or are they all owned by different people?
They are owned by different people. The Invoking and the Device are owned by RLJ Entertainment, formerly Image, and Hunting Grounds is owned by Uncorked Entertainment. So they can't all be together, unfortunately, because I do think they have a very nice thematic connection. But yeah, I don't know. The Device isn't out on Blu Ray yet, and The Invoking, surprisingly, it's only been out a couple of years. It's been re-released like 5 times. It's like in a bunch of double features and triple features. So I was kind of thinking like, oh, maybe when The Device will finally end up on Blu Ray, it'll be in a double feature with The Invoking, and it'll just be like our couple of movies that RLJ owns will be out there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, that would be a great way for people to, like, start their collection. And, of course, the last question, sir, is what are your plans coming up with the Hunting Grounds finally getting its big release? What next can we expect from you guys?
Well, as a company, the October People, we haven't really slowed down, even though it took a little while between filming and eventual wide release of Hunting Grounds. In that time, we kept working on other projects, and we actually have a movie that's just about finished with post-production now that we produced called Ayla, and that's a supernatural drama. It's a little weirder than some of the other stuff we've done, and that stars Tristan Risk and Dee Wallace from Abominable, which was a lot of fun. I actually forgot to talk to her about it on set, although I did mention Secret Admirer, and she got a kick out of me bringing that movie up.
Nice.
But that will be coming into festivals later this year, and it's actually the first October People production that's not directed or written by me or Jeremy Berg. It was actually written and directed by a guy named Elias. He's a real artiste because he just has one name. But he did a movie a couple years ago called Gut, which is actually, we got our main cast from Sasquatch via Gut. We saw it on the festival circuit. We hooked up with Elias for his next script, and Jason Vale and Miles Joris-Peyrafitte from Hunting Grounds, both of them are in Elias's first movie, Gut. And so it's kind of this partnership that sprang about from us meeting each other on that, indie festival circuit when Cedar Ridge was going around. And we're really excited by it. It's really big in scope. We think it is a very interesting kind of story. It's a lot different than our previous things while still having that same sort of heart and character depth that you come to appreciate from our other movies. So I'm excited for people to see that. It'll be interesting just because, let's say, there's not as much blood and guts payoff. There's a little more weirdness and nudity. It's good that, you just did the single white female episode. It's sort of like if Cronenberg did one of those 90s Skinamax movies, I think is how Ayla can best be described.
Oh, nice. Very nice. And Tristan Risch, she's another one who, again, does all these horror movies. And if you follow her on Instagram, you can see does a lot of, like, burlesque performances and things like that. But another complete sweetheart, just a friendly, wonderful, lovely person full of exuberance when I interviewed her anyway. Very bouncy and nice.
Yes, no, she's great. And she gives a really interesting performance. Not to spoil anything, she does not talk in the movie. It's a completely silent performance, and so she just has to emote with her eyes and with her body. So that kind of burlesque background really tied into it, and I think she does some very interesting things. And also, I forgot to mention it before, there's a couple of returning October people faces that show up in the movie. Of course, D'Angelo Midili plays one of the major supporting players, and Bill Oberst Jr. has a nice comedic cameo in a couple of scenes. So you can look forward to seeing them in the movie as well.
Awesome, man. Well, when that comes out, we'll want to take a look, and we'll have you back on the show to talk about it. And if we do any more sort of monster movies or Bigfoot movies or things like that, you'll have to come back and talk a couple more. This has been a real pleasure, man. Really loved having you on the show. So thanks ever so much for that.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, John Cross.
We're talking Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot. I'm singing Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot. Hiding in the forest. Do you have a complex about your big feet? 'Cause you're all so tall and excessively hairy, with mutilating claws and a big sharp teeth. Is that why you hide? Is that why you hate us? Is that why you would take us instead of a meet and greet? Is it because inside yourself, wise old Bigfoot, you're so much more than your huge and hairy feet? We're talking Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot. We're singing Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot. I said Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot, hiding in the caves. Do you dream of one day working in an office, wearing a tie and chatting up the lady in accounting, having water cooler chats instead of hiding in a forest? Do you dream of more, oh Bigfoot? Do you dream of love? Do you dream of a home, a car, and a picket fence? Or do you just want to be left alone with your big old feet? After all, cars and houses aren't cheap. Human life is just one big expense. Oh, it's just one big expense after another. Oh, we're singing Bigfoot, oh Bigfoot. Oh.